It's like people have stopped drifting in. Jay is the last drifter. So I will go through the roll call. Welcome to TTAC. Hopefully this is the meeting you intended to come to. So I see from Amherst, we have Natasha Kipfer. I don't see anybody from Brookline yet, do we? Hollis, Joan Cudworth is with us. Hudson, Caleb Cheng is representing the town today. Litchfield is not represented. Jay could vote for them if need be, but we do have a quorum today, so that's an optional vote. Lineborough, Mark Chamberlain is here. Mason is represented by Cassie Mullen. Merrimack, Don Twamulla is here. Milford, I don't see anybody. There's a couple of phone numbers. I'm not sure who they are.
Hi, Pete Cahalmi from Nashua.
Okay, Mont Vernon, not present. Nashua, Julie, Wayne, husband, Mark Sullivan are with us, correct? Pelham, Jeff Gowan, and Jen Beauregard. Wilton is not represented. NTS, John Savage is here. NHDOT, Lucy St. John is here. NHDES, Tim White is present. Federal Highway, Lee Levine. And from NRPC, we have myself, Greg Lantos, Matt Wakens, Jay Mankara, Derek Stahl, Mason Twombly. And we have a guest speaker with us today, Chris Buchanan from the Souhegan Valley Rail Trail Group. So let us commence with the minutes of November 18th, 2020. And hopefully had a chance to review those. If there are any issues, errors, omissions, typos even, let us know and we'll make the changes. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved, Jeff Gowan, Pelham.
And a second.
Second, Mark Chamberlain, Lineborough.
Any opposition or abstentions, let us know. And I will declare them to be approved. Okay, so we will move on to our feature presentation today, which is the Souhegan Valley Rail Trail Concept Proposal. Chris Buchanan is with us and Matt Wakens will make the introductory remarks for that presentation.
Okay, thanks, Greg. And Chris, go ahead and share your screen and you can do that. So yeah, I'm just going to provide some context, a brief introduction of this initiative and then hand it off to Chris. And apologies to those of you who have seen this presentation a few times already. So for those of you who are new to this, the Friends of the Souhegan Valley Rail Trail is a group that both Chris and I are members of now, and some others in the meeting as well. So it's a group that evolved out of the Nashua Region Complete Streets Advisory Committee, which is a group that meets regularly to discuss ideas and plan for how to incorporate complete streets into the transportation system in the region. That Complete Streets Committee is formerly the Nashua Region Bike Ped Committee. We rebranded a few years ago, kind of at the behest of the current commissioner of DOT came on board. So in any event, this group is aware of that Complete Streets is a transportation planning expression that refers to streets that are designed for the use of everybody, including motor vehicles, pedestrian bicycles, transit users, of all ages, all abilities. So that's, you're aware of that expression. And I know you all are also very familiar with Route 101A between Nashua and Milford, and then kind of by extension, Route 101 out towards the Milford-Wilton area. We all understand that's a very, you know, a significant, the most significant, probably east-west corridor in the region. It does a great job accommodating motor vehicles and not as good a job accommodating bicyclists and pedestrians and that sort of thing. There's also an active right-of-way, railroad right-of-way that runs parallel to 101A and 101. And this Complete Streets Committee that I referred to has been discussing feasibility of developing a shared use bike ped path alongside that active rail line that would better accommodate these various alternative modes. The private railroad company, which is Pan Am, that owns the right-of-way, has put all of its holdings up for sale. It's apparently has an agreement with CSX, which is another railroad company. It happens to be the third largest in the country. So they apparently have an agreement, a purchase agreement. You know, CSX has yet to file with the Surface Transportation Board about that. Latest rumor is that will happen in this week. And Chris will talk a little about some of the details of that idea of just what that filing means. So this Friends of the Souhegan Valley Rail Trail group was formed to advocate and plan for the possibility of incorporating that non-motorized shared use path alongside the rail line. This group recognizes that it's an exceedingly rare opportunity, you know, to work with this new owner of the potential new owner of the right of way. So we want to take advantage of that. And the group is 100% supportive of the corridor remaining an active rail line, and just as excited about the possibility that alternative modes could coexist in that very important rail corridor. You know, I would note that NRPC is also, you know, obviously 100% supportive of, you know, continued, you know, rail service along that line and just various alternative modes as well. So our objective today is just to make you aware of the efforts of this group, answer questions you may have, and then you can consider how TTAC can help move this initiative forward. So I'm going to turn this over to Chris. He's going to do his presentation, which has a lot more detail about what I just talked about. So go ahead, Chris.
Folks, just checking, is the screen sharing appropriately? Can you see?
Seems good to me.
Okay. So for those whom I haven't met before, I'm Chris Buchanan. I'm a fire captain in Amherst. I'm the chairman of the Amherst Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. And as Matt mentioned, I'm also on the board of directors of the Friends of the Souhegan Valley Rail Trail. I'd like to echo his apologies. I know that several people here have already heard this, and hopefully there will be something new or some new questions, or perhaps you've thought about this a little bit and you'd like to talk about something new with it. But it's a pretty exciting project, and I've given this presentation maybe about 11 times now, and I still find it interesting, despite that being a large number, to say the same sorts of things over and over and over. So nevertheless, okay, so I'll give a little bit of background as to what the project is. I usually like to talk about this flow, that there's a need for this sort of thing, that there are many benefits for this sort of thing, to discuss the route at hand, the concept of what this could be, and then how it could happen. So alternative transportation, Matt already talked about complete streets. This likely is not a new concept for those folks in this meeting, but so as to say that people like to move around in various ways. And right now in America, car is king, and it would be advantageous for us to start to accommodate the various other ways that people like to get about the area. I think that one of the actual positive things of coronavirus, if there ever could be one, is that it seems like people have reacquainted themselves with walking and biking and being outdoors and other ways to get around the area. And one of the ways that has been accommodated is the sharp decline in motor traffic on our roadways, which has largely rebounded to maybe near normal figures at this point, but it did instill in a lot of people's minds, it seems, the value of having this opportunity to comfortably and safely get through the area and not just a car. So the need, okay. In terms of the statistics and the engineering behind it, the reality is that the way that we design our roads in America and the way that we've been designing them since about the 1940s through 60s, we've adopted a method that is maximizing the vehicular flow. And that is the highest priority that we have, is to focus on numbers of how many cars it takes to get through an area and to minimize traffic and things of that nature. The result of this has been that roads have gotten wider, traffic has been able to go faster, and while our efficiency for motor vehicles is generally excellent, the accommodation for other modes of transportation is lacking. It's usually a very secondary consideration, the safety of other types of road users. Sometimes it is taken into consideration, and other times it's just not factored in, usually due to budget reasons or things of that nature. A little bit about the physics of this. So when a car hits a human, that this orange line happens. And what that is on the left is the probability of fatality, and on the top is the speed. So at about 18 miles an hour or so, up to about 35 miles an hour, the probability of fatality when a car hits a human increases dramatically. Same sort of event occurs at a faster speed, between 45 and 55 miles an hour, when a car hits another car head on, revealing that the human body is only capable of sustaining a certain amount of energy. And the benefit of being within a car's numerous safety mechanisms simply shifts that curve to the right, so that we can absorb higher speeds, but really the same amount of energy is absorbed by the body. The result of this is that we have three naturally occurring categories of roadways. On the left here, we have roads where it is actually safe to accommodate a mixing of humans with cars, because the probability of fatality is rather low, so long as the cars do not exceed that orange line, that threshold of fatality, or even get close to it, really. In this middle category of, we have no longer a safe atmosphere to mix people with cars. It is best to separate cars from people through physical separation at that point, so that it is not possible anymore for cars to actually hit humans. Then on the right, it's actually the same sort of thing, except you should separate cars from cars at that point, specifically by direction. And that's why when you look at an interstate highway, you can't go mix with the other direction of travel, as getting in a head-on collision on a highway would be often fatal. So if you think about most of the roadways that we have in the area, in the Nashua Planning Region, or wherever it might be, the reality is that you can probably walk around on your neighborhood streets quite safely, as traffic tends not to go too fast, even though that is a common complaint about everyone's neighborhood streets, is how do we get the traffic speed lower so that we can walk in the area safer. But if you think about transportation, the reality is that people are forced to walk and bike mostly for recreational purposes, as to get to the grocery store or to get to your job or wherever it might be, your friend's house. You no longer usually can just stay to that leftmost category of roads, and you're thrust into especially that middle category, where most of our connecting streets are higher speeds, are designed for cars, and the true connectivity purpose of them is not accommodating of those other modes. The result of this has been a bit depressing, and was my original inspiration for getting involved in this sort of thing as a firefighter. But reality is that statistics in the United States indicate that the fatality of bicyclists and pedestrians
That's
is on the
great.
rise. It's since 2009 to 2018, we have a trend that's been going up. We don't have any data since 2018. It takes about 2 years for this information to be processed, but the trend is pretty dark. Reality is that these numbers equate to about a Boeing 747's worth of fatalities per month of American pedestrians and bicyclists due to collisions. Reality beyond just the fatality numbers is that we rely on cars to get around, and personal vehicles are one of the most expensive ways to get around. The cost of it is in many different ways, environmentally, but also financially. And then there are huge swaths of the American population who simply can't drive. A quarter of Americans cannot drive, whether they're too old or too young, or they have a disability, or whatever it might be. It's a quarter of Americans can't drive, yet almost all of our transportation is based off of the concept of somebody having a personal vehicle. This gets especially difficult in more rural areas, such as New Hampshire or many other places, as the resources that you might find with buses or other modes of transportation are harder to fund across municipalities. But I probably don't need to say too much more about that, other than that this isn't just some inner city problem that you find in large metropolitan areas either. One of the most interesting facts that came about from this research process is that within just 2 miles of on either side of the line, the rail line that we're going to discuss, 3,000 households in the Nashua planning region do not have access to a personal motor vehicle and are entirely dependent on other modes of transportation. So this really isn't just some other problem in other places. Going into the benefits of what such a thing could offer, other than addressing just the needs that I've mentioned thus far, I cite a lot of studies here, and I think it's probably not particularly interesting to go into the details of it. Maybe I should refine part of this presentation, but I'll kind of give a sort of brief overview over the data that is available for the benefits. The first thing is that money invested into alternative transportation systems tends to enhance the local economy in ways that other transportation funding efforts do not. The clearest example of this is that we don't have any oil drilling facilities in the Nashua planning region, nor do we have any refineries, and we don't have any car manufacturing facilities here either. So the infrastructure that we have for cars is largely based off of an economy that takes money from here and places it elsewhere. Conversely, the facilities that are designed to accommodate bicyclists and pedestrians are generally ones that are local. Businesses that accommodate people who are walking on a rail trail or something like that. You have small pop-up businesses who show up to accommodate to this particular type of demographic. And if you've spent much time on rail trails, you can see how local businesses really do benefit from that type of clientele. Furthermore, the people who tend to use a rail trail or other alternative transportation facilities tend to patron local businesses in a manner different than those of motor vehicle users. The thing that I usually try to explain to people with this is that as one were to drive down 101A, you're traveling at about 40 miles an hour, and it's usually somebody's trying to get from one place to another. And while you may have a business in mind that you're going to, in general, you're traveling at such speed that you do not tend to think about the numerous businesses you're passing by. And while you may, in general, people don't. Conversely, the people who utilize alternative transportation facilities such as rail trails actually have a great deal more time to look at local businesses and envision themselves in them buying things and whatever. And the result is that places within a certain spatial distance of a bikeable and walkable facility have measurable impact, positive impact economically. That is both for commercial businesses and also for private home values. So personal home values, property values, that's it. So I'll just skip this Baltimore study, but the more interesting thing here is that the Department of Interior did an inventory of 90,000 home sales in the United States over a very long period of time. And they measured the benefit of home transactions that were in areas deemed walkable and bikeable. And across the entire country, the property value, the transaction benefit of having those terms associated with your house was an increase of $4,000 to $34,000 in home value. Local studies, including one by the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail in Massachusetts, northern Massachusetts, indicated that home sales along rail trails in New England had a 41% reduction in time on the market, that these houses are going faster and that they're able to have a higher value. The last benefit to talk about, benefits, I guess, are the two that are a little bit less measurable. You can't just go and quantify the sense of community like you might be able to home value. But the reality is that Americans generally do not move very much, and there's an obesity problem in the country. It's very difficult to go and engage in active transportation, even for fitness purposes. And having this as an option creates an obvious opportunity for people to just have more active lifestyles. Furthermore, the sense of community that comes from having a facility like this, while more abstract, is enormous. The other example that I give to people is if you envision yourself again driving down 101A during perhaps a rush hour period, you'll often find that people are frustrated and little examples of road rage here and there. The way that people behave when they're in their cars with their neighbors amongst them is very similar to that of social media. There's a certain anonymity that happens when you're driving in your car, and people's manners and sense of community erode away quickly, and manifesting in some of the things that we see with road rage and stuff like that. And the exact opposite is true of alternative transportation facilities, where you can see your neighbors, you can talk to people, and it's often mentioned when we give this presentation, people are just talking about how they saw their neighbors the other day walking down the street or on the sidewalk or whatever it might be. So there are many benefits to having such a facility in the region. Well, okay, taking a look at the route here. So that's all concept of why such a thing would be good to have. Let's take a look at the actual physical environment that we have and what can or could be done with it. So this Nashua planning region, I apologize if it's a little hard to see some of this. Maybe I need more contrast on this map, but on the right there on the east, you'll see we have Nashua, and in the northwest is Wilton. So this route is the Hillsborough Branch Rail Line. It spans from approximately 25 Crown Street in East Nashua, the site of the current park and ride facility and possibly the future passenger rail station, generally northwesternly along 101A through Nashua, Merrimack, Amherst, Wilton. Sorry, I'll just go in order. Nashua, Merrimack, Hollis for just a little bit, Amherst, Milford, and Wilton. And it is currently owned by Pan American Railways, but it has two operators right now. So while Pan Am has trackage rights for the entire corridor, the Milford Bennington Railroad, which operates a shuttle service from Lineborough to West Milford also has 5.36 miles of trackage rights in this westernmost portion of Pan Am's track. As you can see here, it's they offer a shuttle service of about 10 cars per trip. It's generally seasonal, but the local benefit of having this freight operation happening, it takes a lot of heavy raw materials off of municipal streets in the Wilton area. Our research concluded that there's really only one other shipper on the entire route, and that is Hendricks Manufacturing in West Milford, and there's nothing else. So I don't need to repeat what Matt had said, other than to say that the rail line is up for sale, which does offer a tremendous and extremely rare opportunity. This is not a new concept. Looking through NRPC documents, this has been talked about for decades, actual decades, and the current owner, Pan American Railways, has not had a particularly warm reception to the concept of having a rail with trail or any sort of thing in this right of way. So the fact that the rail line is changing hands just objectively offers an opportunity for something to happen. There's no guarantee there is such an opportunity, but the fact that it's a possibility means that this organized movement should be having a conversation at least. The U.S. Surface Transportation Board has regulatory authority over the transaction that is likely to occur with CSX, including a public input opportunity. So the value of having a rail, a shared use path within the rail right of way could be communicated to the Surface Transportation Board and thus considered as a way to augment the upcoming sale. Just a couple of details about that route that I mentioned. 115,000 people live within 2 miles of either side of this rail line. That's 54% of the entire Nashville planning region. 63,400 jobs, and I mentioned before, 3,000 households that do not have access to a personal vehicle. There, what we've done is we've been able to break apart the route into 5 segments, each of which is defined by their own unique characteristics and needs. So just a real quick running through of those areas. I'll go to the east part of this, the green portion you see in Nashua. So again, Crown Street to this first section, start at Crown Street, and then the new work with the Heritage Rail Trail would be right next to it. Then it crosses Main Street and would end at Broad Street. Then continuing northwest from Broad Street, we have this portion which is directly behind much of the commercial facilities found on 101A, right behind them in several instances. So this could offer rear access to many existing businesses for bicycle and pedestrian use. Continuing northwestern, we have this portion that has access to very small parts of Merrimack and Hollis, and then much of southern Amherst, again with a large commercial opportunity here. And then this section would end at New Hampshire 122 based off of the complexities needed in a grade separated crossing over the intersection with 122. Continuing to the west, we have this portion through Milford that I still believe is one of the most consequential parts, as Milford is generally arranged in an east-western manner, and that 101A already serves as the primary way to get through many parts of Milford, and having this as a parallel route would become a defining part of the community. It's hard to overstate the potential value that this could have. And then characterized by the usage of the Milford-Bennington Railroad, this next segment starts at Westchester Drive in West Milford and continues to Wilton Center, where perhaps the most important value of the rail with trail concept is most clearly described by the need for having the Milford-Bennington Railroad operational. Some quick descriptions of what a rail trail geometric design is. It's not very complicated, but as this is intended to be an alternative transportation facility, not just something that people can do for recreational purposes. Of course, they still could, but the hope would be that it would be plowed and thus maintained year-round for transportation purposes, much like a small road would be. And when you have a cold climate like we have here with winter making up basically half of the year, it's advantageous to have this as a transportation facility year-round that way. Rail with trail is not a new concept at all. So if CSX intends to keep the rail line operational, then there are various schemes that are already available in the New Hampshire trail plan for how rail lines can coexist safely and easily within the rights of way of active rail lines. This is really just not a new concept at all. It currently exists in Laconia. Right now there are active rail with trail environments, and CSX itself also has several rail with trail schemes around the country. Just a couple of other pictures. The one on the right there is being built right now in New York. So wrapping things up here, I really don't have much else to say and would have an opportunity for questions and answers if there are any, but our intent here is to have to form an organization, which was done this past fall. We want to spread the word about this by developing a grassroots movement for support for it. We've been rather successful with that, I believe, as nearly 200 people have already demonstrated interest enough in this project to subscribe to our newsletter. And we had a pretty decent turnout of about 40 people at our first meeting a couple weeks ago. We hope to work with public officials and other organizations such as the NRPC and even TTAC as a way to establish this project as one that isn't just an ambitious idea that people would like to have someday but don't really know what it could be, but rather an established project that has actual prospect. Next would be funding. It's very difficult to say how this could roll out right now, as we need to assess the receptivity of CSX to having a shared use path within their right of way. There are so many different ways that this could unfold, whether CSX abandons the rail line and then sells it to the state or donates it to the state, or they keep the rail line and are interested in having a shared use path beside it, and then they could either donate or sell an easement to allow such a thing to happen. And then there's like 60 other ways that this could unfold. And we don't know all of those answers right now. So what sort of funding will be necessary? Would federal funding become available with new surface transportation legislation that's on the horizon, or infrastructure stimulus money that is also a prospect in the next several months? Hard to say, but funding will likely be necessary in one form or the other. Then last two points here is that corridor access must be obtained. The fact of the matter is you can't build a rail trail on somebody else's land without their permission. So that is an obvious step that must occur. And then when all these things are in place, only then could a project start unfolding. So that's the end of the presentation. And then I would stop talking, and hopefully folks are still awake. And if there are any questions, I'm sure now's a good time.
So, hey, Chris, I wanted to point out that there are, and to everyone, there are in the vicinity of 350 rail with trails in the United States. So it's by no means a an unusual thing.
I'll just throw in not a question, but a comment, but I have spoken to the Vice President for Government Affairs for the Northeast at CSX. So they are aware of this project. And we have shared some of the background information and materials with them. Of course, no commitments, no comments at this point, but at least it is on their radar.
So Chris, we are now in the season where we're updating our transportation improvement program, which is accompanied by what we call minor update to our long range metropolitan transportation plan. So we've discussed this project among the staff, and we're going to propose that it be added to the long range plan. Now, I've tried to develop a ballpark cost estimate, which was based on the Amherst project along the B&M rail line. And that was a project that was reviewed by NHDOT. It's largely an unpaved section with some paved sections where the slopes demand that. But I extrapolated that per mile cost to the 16 miles for your proposed trail and come up with a figure for 9.5 million. So that's the figure I have in there right now. I'm open to increasing that amount for additional paving costs. If you have some estimates I could plug in, I would need to do it basically over the next 30 to 40 days, well, 30, 35 days as we enter the public comment period for the plan. But that's something we'd like to do. So an additional question I have is you presented 5 distinct segments. So is that how you would recommend that we portray the project as 5 separate phases in the MTP with their own costs? Are you intending to build it segment by segment, or are you just displaying that for the purposes of display?
So I have 2 replies for what you've mentioned so far. The first would be that we're lucky to have stumbled upon a civil engineer who's willing to donate a little bit of time to this organization. One of the many benefits of getting the reach that we've been able to have so far. And last week, I went ahead and asked him if he'd be willing to put together, to the best of his ability, cost figures for the entire route by section. And he said that he'd be willing to provide that to us this week. So
Great.
Good timing. And
that is fantastic.
He's working on that right now. I'll add that there are some complexities to that are extremely difficult to answer right now. Just to run down very quickly the 2 possible situations, which would be that the first is if it would be a rail with trail configuration, there are numerous grade separated crossings that would then be added to the cost of the facilities, such as crossing the Everett Turnpike or crossing the Nashua River. These facilities that exist right now are only designed for rail use and could not accommodate rail with trail in their design. So that dramatically increases the cost of the project. If in the event that they choose to abandon the rail line, it simplifies the way that grade crossings would occur. But what I did do is I asked him to provide information for either of those possibilities, because it just doesn't hurt to have the information. So that information is going to be had hopefully this week, and I'll be able to pass that along. Regarding the segments, though, I wouldn't say that there's necessarily a better way to follow the progression of building the rail trail. I would emphasize that I can't speak for the board or for the entire organization, but my personal opinion would be that the best approach is the one that maximizes the chance of this rail trail happening. Of course, if I had $1 trillion and everything were great, then I would just build the whole thing tomorrow and we'd be happy and we can go about our lives. But obviously it's more complicated than that. And so I wouldn't say that I know which is the most politically expedient way to roll this out, which is why separating it into 5 distinct segments provides us the opportunity to do that if there is no ability to fund the entire corridor. But it isn't necessarily a suggestion that that is the only way or even that it should happen that way. So I would kind of yield to your judgment as to what the right way is to do it. I think that there is a balance here with federal monies potentially becoming available in the next year or so. You never know what might happen in terms of large funding becoming available. But I do understand that segment by segment, generally starting in the east, is probably the most prudent way to have a more long-term approach.
Hey, I see Julie was raising her hand.
Hi, I think, Greg, what years are you thinking about putting it in?
I was going to mention that. I'm looking now at the 2040 to 2045 time frame.
Okay, I would suggest that you just put it in as one project until we know what the logical breaks would be based on the engineering review and assessment. I mean, we might be able to guess, but there might be reasons that we want to stop or continue on based on a destination or a logical point.
Yeah, I'm calling it one project now, and I had, I think, 4 construction years or four years of project implementation. So I think I basically had that, but I can just call it one project for now and go over, several years. So I should note that that 9.5 million figure is based on inflating the base year cost to that time frame.
Hey, if you can do it for 9, I think that's amazing. We're looking at building 3/4 of a mile, and it's about 1.5 million at this point, and that doesn't include any right of way or easement. So I just, there are going to be a lot of considerations that might be different than the Amherst model.
Right.
Especially if there's active train and you're going to need security fencing between the rail line and a rail width trail. And also there might be lighting concerns through the more urban portions, let's say. So
Right.
I think waiting until, I think it's great to get to the MPP and I love that. I might take that 9 and double it, but I think once Chris's contact engineer gives it a look, that might give us a more reasonable number to put in.
We still have room in our theoretical budget for the long term to bump that number up. We could double it or.
Well, I don't want it, I say that it was a little bit flip, but I mean, I don't want it to be so high that it's a turnoff as a project. I want to make sure that it's realistic, so I just want to make sure that we have an engineering judgment to the estimate that gets put in the MTP. Because like you say, it'll be important for going forward with grants and whatever.
I can guarantee it will be cheaper than some of the other projects we've had in the MTP that aren't likely to happen, such as the Northern Crossing, what we call the illustrative projects. But we want this to be more than an illustrative project. We think that we do have, room in the long term. I'm not going to say that, the funds will be available, within the next 10-year plan round or anything like that. But over the long term, if we get it in there, it's something that could be phased in, I would think. And you never know how, funding may change, in the next round of legislative action.
Absolutely. And I welcome anyone else's opinion on my strategy, but I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Well, I agree with Julie's thoughts. I think it does make sense to put it in as one project. The segments, that Chris proposed or have been proposed, I think are logical in terms of breaking up the project. But we also do have to keep in mind that we have 6 different municipalities along this route. And we have to consider that and thinking about how it's going to get broken up and also how funding is going to work, especially if there are municipal matches. So keep it as one for now, I think makes sense.
I think to Chris, and we haven't had a chance to speak, but I think it would be maybe beneficial to make sure there is a member of each community on your board as you form the official board of directors for this project. I think having even an elected official would be best, but having some official from each community on your board might be helpful in keeping this moving through the municipal processes.
Very much our desire to do that.
Does anybody else have any questions for Chris, or any thoughts or comments you want to share? Looks not. Well, thanks, Chris, for a great presentation.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot. Okay, so we'll move on to our next item. We have a couple of performance measure updates now. The public transportation agency safety performance measure we did pass last time, but there was a minor change to the number of safety events, which also, of course, affects the rate per 100,000 per 100,000 vehicle revenue miles. So I think we can just take the two in one motion. So that's the only change on that one. And I'll move on to discussion of the highway safety performance targets. So most of you have been involved with these on an annual basis and are pretty aware of the process, but we do have a few new people. So we do have safety measures and targets that we set each year that deal with 5 measures: the number of fatalities, the rate of fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles of travel, the number of serious injuries, and then the rate of serious injuries, and then lastly, the number of non-motorized fatalities and non-motorized serious injuries. So, and I'm referring to attachment 3 in your handout. So if I'll bypass the actual targets for now, just to go through some of the trends that we are seeing. So on page 3, we have the number of fatalities, and what we see is that both at the statewide level and within our region, we've shown a pretty good decline in 2019, the most recent data that we're using to develop the 2021 targets. So in our region, we work off of a 5-year moving average, and that is now at 10.4 fatalities per year. And that's the lowest point that we've been at since 2012. And the moving average just started up in 2011. That was the first year for which we have a 5-year moving average. So we see.
Just to interject, Matt, could you screen share? Because I don't think everybody's looking at their agenda packets right now.
Okay, so just move it down to page 3. Okay, and you can just move a little bit down to the graph there. So what we see now is a declining trend. So we've kind of reversed some of the previous conditions. And I'll note one thing, that beginning in 2017, you might recall that a more stable database has been used for obtaining the crash data. That's called the New Hampshire Vision Database. So that plus the federal database, which has always been, we assume, pretty good, is used for the fatalities. But when we move on to the serious injuries, we think we're getting a lot better data. So, you know, it's going to take a couple more years for the trend to really be stabilized in terms of what it's showing us. But we're looking at a declining trend now for fatalities. And moving on then to the next graph just shows the fatality rates per VMT, also, of course, a decline. And so then let's move it over to 5, where we look at the number of serious injuries. And here you would notice that, look at the table beginning in 2017 with the new vision database, the number of serious injuries dropped very dramatically. So this is bringing down the moving average at a rapid rate, and we expect that to continue certainly for a couple of more years. So we're guaranteed that this will look very good for a couple of years, as right now our 5-year serious injury rate stands at 58.4, and that's at an all-time low. So, and we anticipate that will continue to decline as we weed out the 2015 and 2016 data.
So Greg, if I could jump in with, are you suggesting that the primary factor here is really the data source as opposed to changes or improvements on the ground?
Yeah, for the last 3 years, we're at 53, 43, and 51. So that's quite lower from most, but not all years before 2017. So I would have to say it's the key factor at this point. Until we are able to establish, the new database as, being the sole determinant of the trend, we don't want to go too far in, what we're making out of all of this data. I'd let Lucy chime in with that. The DOT, also has their viewpoint on the crash data. Okay, so moving on to page 6, the rate of serious injuries, that also, of course, is showing decline. And then finally, our last one, the number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries on page 8. This, we have a very slight decline. It's really a statistic that bounces up and down quite a bit. We were very low in 2018, only 2 incidents, 7 in 2019. So the trend shows a slight decline overall. So all of our performance targets, we don't have any situation where we have an increasing trend, which we've dealt with in the past by not accepting an increasing trend. We've just based it upon the moving average. We do have a situation now where we're showing declining trends, so we can extrapolate those in all cases to 2021 to accept as our targets. So if you move back to page 2, that table does provide all of the data going back to 2011 and it demonstrates what the 2020 target was and then the 2021 target. So fatality total 10.4, fatality rate declining to 0.619. The serious injury total also declines to projected 57. Serious injury rate, slight decline to 3.3. And the non-motorized fatal and serious injuries, just a slight bump up to 7.3 from the previous target, not from the previous data. So those are our targets. Any questions on those? These are required, performance measures that we need to adopt. They're quite general in terms of applying throughout our region. It's not data that you can use to, apply to any specific area. That requires a much more targeted analysis of crash data. But they provide us with some sort of indicator of where we're heading region-wide with respect to safety.
Thank you, Greg. I think it'll be really interesting to see the 2020 numbers. I mean, all the data shows in New Hampshire specific data is we had a unfortunately high number of fatal pedem cyclist incidences this year, or last year in 2020. So we'll have to keep that in mind when we're looking at the next year's data set, that we're going to keep our trend going down regardless of what the data says. We want to propose that.
Right, and you were wise to provide the motion a while back that we would only accept the moving average, not an increasing trend. And the DOT does have the same policy in terms of their targets. Any other questions? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to approve the revision to the Public Transportation Agency safety performance target and to the safety performance targets for roadways.
So moved.
And a second?
Second from Mark.
Okay, so I will go through the list. Rules are one vote for one town. So if there's going to be a debate over it, carry it on internally and let us know. Amherst,
Hipfer, yes.
Hollis,
Yes.
Hudson,
Aye.
Litchfield. Are you voting or not voting, Jay?
Yes.
Lineborough,
Aye.
Mason,
Yes.
Merrimack,
Yes.
Nashua,
Anyone in Nashua have an opposition?
No.
All right, then, yes, thank you.
Pelham,
Yes.
NTS,
Yes.
NHDOT,
I abstain.
HDES.
Yes.
Okay, were there any other towns that snuck in while I've been speaking? Okay, the motion carries then. We'll recommend to the MPO that these performance targets be adopted. Okay, so moving on, at this point, I will attempt to share my screen. So we should have the UPWP tasks up there. We're now preparing our FY 22-23 Unified Planning Work Program. I mentioned this a couple months back, and it's still in the preparation stage. So if there are specific transportation planning tasks you would like us to incorporate into it, that's fine. It's kind of a living document. You know, things come up at the local level, requests for studies for counts and so forth, and you know, there's no problem in doing these sorts of tasks within the scope, unless it was something very large that we would have to designate it as a special study and develop a separate work scope for the New Hampshire DOT. But do let us know if there's anything specific. We'll be submitting this to DOT early in February. So just to run through it quickly by task, 100 is our administration and training. And while we seem to be in an avalanche of tasks in the current work program, we had our certification review. We had to do a memorandum of understanding for the Nashua UZA. It's going to be quite a bit lighter next time around, which will free up more time for doing our regular transportation planning projects. So essentially our key tasks will be the UPWP performance report, which details what we did over the last UPWP. We meet with DOT, write up a report at the mid-contract point, and then of course we develop the UPWP for the next time around. Under task 103 training, we have suggested to DOT that synchro training would be very beneficial. And this is a newer version of the highway capacity analysis software. Has a lot more bells and whistles. We do have synchro, but we are untrained in having to use it. I think some of our staff got the training a few years ago, and some of them have left, and it's fallen into disuse. So some of us older transportation people here are more used to using the older HCM, but so hopefully there'll be training for the agencies on that.
A question on that, Greg?
Pardon?
In the past, NRPC was able to open that training up to the municipalities because you have a trainer come up and there's so many seats. Do you know if that's the case this time, or is it a per person?
Well, there's no time that's been set, but the request has already been communicated to NHDOT. So I think they're going to solicit interest, and yes, I would think that municipalities would have the opportunity to join in on that for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, Wayne's another old timer who would benefit as well as myself. So 200 policy and planning. Task 201 is the 10-year plan. So this coming fall, we'll have the GASSET hearings, and then that's followed by the next 10-year plan project submission round, which we're looking at August of 2022 to kind of wrap that up, followed by the project prioritization. Task 202 is planning and environmental linkages. We engage with the Stormwater Coalition. We do develop environmental mitigation strategies for new MTP projects that would have a significant impact. Not all of them do, but even something like the rail trail, would probably be looked at. And environmental justice performance metrics is something that we want to delve further into so that we can actually quantify the impacts of projects on the minority and low-income populations. Task 203 is the Transportation Planners Collaborative, which works towards the alignment of state and federal transportation planning processes. And where that was involved in most recently in updating the 10-year plan development procedures. And I think there'll probably be additional work in that area coming up. Task 204 is our monthly interagency consultation process, where this involves coordination meetings between the MPOs and the state and the federal agencies. Task 205, the Transportation Improvement Program, is now in process. We do periodic amendments on whenever major changes are proposed. Each year we put out an obligated project list for federal requirements. And then the next FY 23-24 tip development will take place 2 years from now. Task 206 is the congestion management process, and we're working towards the completion of the CMP report. And there will be update of that as we go forward using new NPM RDS data, new analysis of traffic congestion conditions. And I would suspect that the next update, not the full update to the report, but the update of statistics would focus on the changes in congestion that have occurred due to reduced traffic levels from the COVID situation. Task 207 is Intelligent Transportation System, and we've gotten a start on the ITS update. It's not going to be completed in the current work program due to staff having to deal with other tasks, and loss of staff was a factor in that. So we're going to have a carryover here, and we will complete that product in the next UPWP period. The Metropolitan Transportation Plan, I mentioned that we're doing a minor update now where we primarily update our financials, and we can and will be adding a few projects. We have the new project I had mentioned and at least one other initiative, but we also add the projects that were added in the recently completed TYP project submission update. So those are being put into the MTP. But the full update will be undertaken in 2022, completed by December of that year. We also have update of all performance measures, including the safety, infrastructure, travel time reliability, transit asset management, and public transit agency safety performance. So all those get updated when the MTP is updated. Transportation air quality conformity task 209 is basically just planning level air quality conformities for the tip and plan. If things change that they want to look at more detailed analysis again, we will revert back to emissions modeling. Task 210 is the state long range transportation plan, and we've been informed that that will be updated in the next UPWP, so we'll be providing technical assistance. There's been some question among a few of us what the state is looking for in terms of what should we be budgeting. We really don't have a good handle on what our level of effort is to be. So Lucy, I don't know if you have any input on that. as far as, what we should be budgeting and what sort of tasks we should be identifying.
I think that's a question that you can refer to William, and I think we could follow up on that. So,
Very good.
Yep.
Okay. Task 211 is our bicycle and pedestrian planning, and we're working towards update of our regional bike ped plan, and so that will be completed within the current work program, and implementation alternatives will be explored in the next round, as well as participation in the Complete Streets Advisory Committee. 212 is freight planning, and this is just one of those areas that has been derailed by COVID because we've been looking to really undertake a data collection and analysis program, which involves truck counts, truck generation rates, looking at origin destination patterns. So we certainly hope that we're able to get back into a more normal data collection program as we come into the springtime. We shall see. 300 is public involvement and coordination. 301 is the TTAC. We meet most months, as you know. 302 are the executive committee meetings. 303, our public participation plan was updated in 2020, and we'll continue to look at ways to further update that and the implementation of it. Task 304, public outreach. Increasingly, we're using surveys for soliciting public opinion. So we're going to continue to ramp that up and use new technologies. And we are particularly interested in targeting outreach to underrepresented transportation groups. That's something we've developed a expanded mailing list as we prepare to enter the public comment period for TIP and MTP update. 305 are the regular MPO TMA policy committee meetings. These are quarterly, but we also will be supplementing them as needed, such as an additional meeting upcoming in February to take on the tip and plan and the performance targets. 400 is our plan support. 401, the traffic count program. We do the regular HPMS counts and traffic counts that we need to maintain our regional traffic model. 402 is the SAIDS inventory. So we do the road surface management system projects upon request. For those that we haven't done one yet, be thinking in terms of whether we can help you on this. We intend to evaluate the Brookline RSMS implementation to see how that's progressed versus what was recommended. And infrastructure assessments, particularly focusing on sidewalks. Task 403 is geographic information systems. This is a very wide array supporting layer for transportation planning tasks. Demographics should be kicking up in the next round as the census data become available. We'll be working on boundary smoothing, updating the base year and projected population and employment for the MTP modeling. That should be sometime during the summer of 2022. Task 405, equipment and supplies. In addition to replacing old traffic counters and buying the routine equipment to support them, we also purchase NPM RDS speed data. We may be looking at perhaps purchasing travel origin destination data, which would help us to calibrate our regional traffic model. It's really been quite a long time since we've obtained any data through a survey that was really useful in determining those types of travel patterns. Task 406 is the regional transportation model. So we'll be conducting model enhancements as we can. We'll be applying the model to the MTP update. We also use the model for specific studies that we do for communities upon request. And we're also looking at potential model integration with other MPOs. That would be a long-range process, but I think it's something that would be worthwhile still considering because individual models are really too contained to be able to evaluate the impacts of some of the major projects that have been going on. 500 is our technical assistance and transit support. So under 501, local and regional assistance, we do things such as transportation chapters for master plans, requests for counts by local communities and data analysis, review of traffic impact studies. And we also have another carryover project, the Merrimack Exit 12 interchange study update that would update the, was a 2004 study. This is was requested by Merrimack. We had to defer it because the traffic counts had just dropped so much during the last season. But they did recover to the 85% plus level. Hopefully that will continue on. And you know, maybe if we're at 90% or better, we can look at just taking the counts and factoring. 502 is statewide assistance. Primarily, this is the state coordinating council and any other data technical assistance to NHDOT. 503 is local public agency program support. This includes assistance with developing the TAP and CMAQ applications, the data analysis, air quality for CMAQ, involvement in the road safety audit process. 504, the special projects, which we have none anticipated, and we try to avoid using this category as it does require separate work scope to DOT. 505 is the Regional Coordinating Council. It's, we provide the staff support for the RCC meetings and technical support. 506 is transit assistance. We staff the NTS meetings, provide map updates and other data. Includes implementing recommendations from previous transit feasibility studies we've undertaken, and also involvement in the National Commuter Rail meeting process. And then finally, under this category, 507 is transportation demand management, another category that's been delayed doing worthwhile projects due to COVID. But we would like to be able to establish a baseline of TDM programs that are going on through the region. And probably COVID is the basic TDM program that's happened without any planning efforts whatsoever. And we'd also evaluate the traffic impacts of potential TDM alternatives. And this can be a marketing tool to employers to implement these. And then finally, under 600, this is our FTA 5305 transit category. And we will be embarking on our third study for a regional volunteer driver program. So as I mentioned, you know, if there's something specific, you know, that you would like us to be doing over the next year, next couple of years, then let us know. We'll just get it right into the work program. Otherwise, any questions? Okay. So moving on then, notification of the Transportation Alternatives Program solicitation. So we did send out the notice on this. Let me see if I can bring that up here. Okay. It. Okay, so do you have the TAP information in front of you? So just to run through it quickly, the program is now been announced by the DOT. The maximum project limit will be 320,000. The minimum project limit is 320,000 federal. The maximum will be 1 million federal. All projects do require a 20% match by the applicant. Eligible activities include on-road and off-road trail facilities, infrastructure-related projects and systems that will provide safe routes for non-drivers, conversion and use of abandoned railroad corridors, and safe routes to school infrastructure activities. There will be a limit of 1 application per community. So the first thing that needs to be done is submission of a letter of interest. This must be into DOT by February 5th, 2021. There will be attendance at a mandatory pre-application information meeting. And then there will be submission of the TAP application. This will be done electronically. The selected communities must designate a full-time employee as the person in responsible charge. So we hope that there will be any responses to this. Certainly a lot of projects that we have in our MTP that qualify. Any questions or any projects you'd like to let us know that you're thinking about? Okay. Then, so we can then move into our updates. I just want to mention one thing here. As Jeff Gowan is here, and we've been requested to take a look at the Hudson Logistics Center in terms of its impacts on the town of Pelham. So we've done a regional traffic impact review, but this is a little bit more specific in terms of would any traffic and specifically trucks be traveling through Pelham. So we did look at potential paths that might be taken through Pelham to various communities. And, you know, I see the potential for maybe half a dozen communities where Pelham could be the best path, and then another dozen or so where, you know, it's not likely, but a potential path in certain circumstances if the main routes were clogged up. So, you know, of the 312 tractor trailer trips per day and 80 box truck trips, you know, we would estimate maybe 1% would have that potential to travel through Pelham. It's not a large number, but we're aware that, you know, in the rural communities such as Pelham, any increase in tractor trailers through a town center is going to be noticed. So, Jeff, did this answer the questions that the Board of Selectmen had, and are they satisfied?
Yeah, yes, I think so. I mean, primarily, your input was helpful in several ways, but it helped me convince the selectmen that we need not go off and hire our own traffic consultant. There are a lot of eyes on this, including yours, other peer review traffic consultants. I have been participating in the Hudson meetings. There's another one tonight, by the way, I'll be participating in remotely. The process seems to be vetting this very carefully. I presently don't believe that we're going to have significant truck impacts, but that's based on Amazon's current proposed use of the facility. And I believe there's still not an end user known for building 3 on that site. But I also understand that their traffic calculations are based on square footage of facility, I would assume in a warehousing or manufacturing realm. So that building 3 is, you know, covered, if you will, with regard to the traffic and studies that have taken place. So, I mean, I'm satisfied that there is adequate scrutiny. Hopefully I'll be retired by the time the thing is built anyway. So any blowback will be on my successor in terms of having missed anything. But again, I appreciate the work you guys do in terms of focusing on those details. And you know, there's no approvals yet out of Hudson, so there's, I think, still some adequate time for any remaining questions to be vetted. And those questions are not just my own, but a lot of folks in Hudson, a lot of residents there have their own questions and own issues, obviously. So we'll see how it progresses, but I would like to thank you again for your responses to my inquiries.
Right, and we're always happy to do these little analyses for local communities. Anything to get away from working on a memorandum of understanding, you know, really makes my day. Okay, so any other municipal updates? And I will move on to NHDOT. Do you have any updates for us today?
I don't have any additional updates. I think you did a nice job going over the TAP requirements.
Okay. NHDES.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Just a quick update on our state clean diesel grant program. The most recent project solicitation we completed was back in November. I think the applications were due November 17th or some date around that. We received about 17 applications, which was a really good response. It's taken us a while to score all those, and we're at the point right now where we're just letting the successful applicants know that their projects are being selected for the next steps. And we're also pretty certain at this point that there's going to be some additional funding left over for us to be able to do a second round of grants. And according to the original timetable that we had for the program, those applications would be due on January 19th. So I realize that's a little bit of a fast turnaround, but if you have a project that you'd like to pursue, I would probably have a look at the DES website, or you can get in touch with me directly, or Jessica Wilcox, our grant coordinator, and we can work through that process for you to see if we can make that grant application happen. Thanks.
Hey, Tim, could you just remind folks what types of applications or what types of projects can be funded?
Historically, the types of applications that we've received over the past, well, about the 4 years that I've been involved in the program have generally been vehicle replacements, vehicle upgrades, engine replacements, and engine upgrades. There's a lot of detailed information on eligible types of projects that you can find on the DES website, and I'll admit it's pretty complicated in terms of eligible project types. And so I think what we usually tell people is the easiest thing to do is just contact us if you think you have a viable project, and we'll work through it with you.
Okay, and finally, Federal Highway.
Yeah, hi Greg. Not much really, just would note, and probably most of you are aware that the president signed a COVID-19 relief package that included $10 billion for highway infrastructure. We haven't heard or seen much about the details yet. We know it's going to be pretty broadly eligible and include things like coverage for revenue losses for states. So, we're expecting to see that sometime in the near future, and we'll provide more details, I'm sure, to the state and our other partners, as soon as we have that more detailed information. That's about it.
I guess we'll be having a more than usual involved interagency session tomorrow to go over a lot of questions on TIP financial constraint, and should be interesting. Probably be needing that Zoom meeting as well. There seems to be a lot of inconsistencies, but hopefully the approach that I laid out there makes sense and will conform to what the DOTs put out for their STIP. So there's no other business. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second.
Seconded, John Savage.
Okay, and hearing no objections, I declare us to be adjourned. Thank you all, and see you again next month to take it up.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.